In this video, we want to explore the Bible Word Study Guide, certainly one of the more powerful features right here in Verbum. And you can always access it by coming to your toolbar and selecting Guides, and there we learn that the Bible Word Study Guide shows how a given word is translated, how it is used in context, and much more. Well, let's give this a try on a word that really counts. Let's come to John chapter 6. And there study the word flesh. I want you to notice that this word appears 6 times in 6 verses, starting at verse 51. And the first thing we notice is that it's a very positive context. Jesus is saying that we need to eat his flesh in order to have eternal life, in order to abide in him. So that sounds great, but if we keep reading, that same word appears in a very different light. Look at verse 63, as Jesus says, "It is the Spirit who gives life, the flesh is no help at all." Well, how do we make sense of that? Is this a different use of the word flesh? What if we could study that? What if we could use Verbum to do so? This is where the Bible word study comes in handy. So just come to Guides, and click Bible Word Study, and that's what I have open here. I've launched a search on flesh, and I'm just going to break down the sections of this Bible Word Study. The first thing we notice is that we have a link to a Catholic Bible dictionary, and in fact, many other Bible dictionaries. But here I have an essay, a mini article that explains what flesh means, both in the Old Testament and then how it's used in the New Testament. And I love that I have this kind of curated list, right? Because there are some 300 plus citations where the word flesh appears in the Bible, and that can be overwhelming to sift through right at the start. Somebody's done that for me, and they've written it up in an essay. That can be a great gateway into study on a topic. So let's collapse that, because I want to show how the next section of the Bible word study is Hebrew words. And what you can notice here is that we have some 188 instances where the word flesh is translating a Hebrew word. And many times, more often than not, that word is basar. That's this blue segment of the ring. It says 177 out of those 188 instances is the word basar. And there is a transliteration in case I didn't know how to say that out loud. Now, you can sift and surf through the Hebrew words, but I want to keep going. Just note this, you can always click the center of the wheel and now hide that section, or click it again and now it opens that section just below. Okay, but let's scroll down to that section called Greek words. Here I have now 147 instances where flesh is translating a Greek word like sarx. And I can click that portion of the ring and see, there it is in transliteration, sarx appears 137 times. And there I can see each and every one of those instances. Again, click the center of the wheel to hide everything. Now, one more tip. You can always click this colorful chart to see the distribution of how the word flesh appears. Apparently, flesh is 28 times in Genesis and 23 times in Romans. So it can be fun to play with those colorful charts. But let's see, what do we have next after Greek words? A section called senses. Now, for us and our study of flesh, this is particularly pertinent. It's not always the case. Sometimes a word is used very consistently with the same meaning. But not here with flesh. Look at all the different meanings that are possible. Could you have imagined that it could mean so much? I love that somebody has already classified every instance of the word flesh. And if I want to see where it means flesh as tissue, I can study that in particular. Now, I'll come back to this in a moment because there's even more precision that we can get to in just a moment. But let's hang on to that. I'll go ahead and open now a Bible word study in a different way. And to be honest, this is the way I do it more often than not. Isn't the case that you're reading through the scriptures and you come upon the word flesh, and you just want to click that word and launch from there the Bible word study. And indeed, you can do that. I can come here to selection, hit flesh, and then choose Bible word study. That's exactly what we've already seen. But look what you can do. Here's a pro tip. Instead of grabbing the word in English, which is just a translation of the original, why not grab the original word, John's word, sarx? To do so, just come to the circle where, see this translation ring next to the word sarx, which means flesh? If I click that, now the right side of the menu changes to the Lemma, sarx, which Lemma just means the dictionary form of the word sarx. And I can launch a Bible word study in Greek. And this is similar and yet different in key ways. Notice the top section does open dictionaries, but not English Bible dictionaries. Instead, lexica. Here's a lexicon on the entry sarx. And there I get an explanation of the Greek word. I could do so in the EDNT. This is a great resource. So is the TDNT, very thorough. The Lexham Theological Word Book is extremely succinct. And you might want to spend some time surfing through these great resources. Okay, so many times studying the Greek word, the original word, is even more helpful than studying the translated word. But if I scroll down, I can see a new section. It's also a translation wheel. Same thing, right? Hold on, not exactly. Look more closely at the center of the wheel. See how it's now a Greek word that's in the center? This is telling me that that Greek word is being translated by a number of different English expressions. So for example, it's often flesh that translates the Greek word sarx. But sometimes, look, sometimes the word body is being used, as in here in 1 Peter 3:21. Baptism, which now saves you, not as a removal of dirt from the body. But now we know, even though in translation, we find the word body. Look, the original is sarx. That's the word, quite literally, which means flesh. That's our word that we found in John as well. So let's see, what else do we have under that translation ring? There's yet another translation ring, but this one's different. It has the Septuagint. Remember, we're studying the Greek word. And this time it's telling me how the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures, how that Septuagint is translating the Old Testament in Hebrew. So for example, I see that sarx is often translating the Hebrew word basar. And I can expand to see in Genesis 2:21, even though we have flesh in English, there the original in Hebrew is basar, but when it gets translated into the Septuagint, that is sarx. This I know from the translation ring right here in the Bible word study. Okay, so I might collapse this because I want to show you now something new. If you go all the way down to the end of the section, we have some really interesting textual searches. I love that Verbum has anticipated what I might desire to look up. It says, don't you want to go look up in the Septuagint where the word sarx is used? Or maybe throughout the New Testament? Or maybe, check out this suggestion. Check out the Apostolic Fathers. I'm going to click this to see where those 1st and 2nd century authors used the same word that John did. How did they use that word? How did they talk about it? In what context? And so immediately I can see that, look, Lake's Apostolic Fathers is opening up in Greek. By the way, if I want to change that to English, just drop down to the Apostolic Fathers in English, and I get these same quotations, but now they're appearing in Greek, or excuse me, in English. And I can see that 1st Clement, 2nd Clement, scrolling down, Ignatius is using this term again and again. And here in his letter to the Philadelphians, look at what St. Ignatius says. Therefore be eager to use one Eucharist, for there is one flesh of our Lord Jesus Christ, and one cup for unity through his blood. There's one altar, as there is one bishop, together with the council of elders and the deacons, my fellow slaves, in order that whatever you do, do it in accordance with God. I think it's really interesting to see that in those first centuries, right after the construction of the New Testament, these authors are using that same language in a Eucharistic context. That might shape my understanding now of the passage that I'm studying. And in fact, this is where I want to end. Let's go back to that section called senses, but here I'm going to do something special. Do you remember how we can expand this section to see all the different ways the word sarx is used throughout the entire Bible? What if we could zoom in? What if we could now filter the Bible to study just John's Gospel? And now I'm looking at sarx as it is in the Gospel of John. And now see how I have a limited number of meanings? I want you to expand that first section which says flesh tissue. And there you're going to see John 6, 52, 53, 54, 55, and 56. Again and again, John is using the word sarx to mean the soft tissue of the body. Okay? That's straightforward enough. But scroll down just a little bit and expand this section called sinful humanity. And there we find John 6, 63. It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh is no help at all. Notice how Verbum is helping me take note of something, namely that the same word, although it's used just a few verses later, is now used in a totally new way, with a new meaning, a new signification. And this might clue me into something. Oh, here in 652 and following, Jesus always is saying his flesh, that is, the flesh of Jesus. But as we go down to 663, he doesn't say his flesh is no help at all. That would be contradicting what he just said again and again, quite emphatically. In 663, he says, the flesh. And I love that Verbum is helping me notice something like that, a different meaning for the same word. So you're going to want to get familiar with this tool. Get ready to click that word with your right mouse, pull up either in English to then do the Bible word study on the English word, or even better in my mind, grab the original Lemma and then run the Bible word study so you can study right there from the original languages, even if you don't know Greek or Hebrew. Isn't that great? So I suggest you get familiar with these tools so that you can make them work for you.